To the ever-persistent peoples of our modern era, we have gathered here today some documents which concern the Hiklaxian War against their rogue region of Leprit. This conflict, which we alluded to in our previous report, would be the furtherance of the Hiklaxian Democratic Revolution, and had some of the highest casualty numbers during the length of the revolution. The Emperor of Hiklax, for the most part, was where the declaration of hostilities came from, with him giving the Revolutionary Council of Leprit a 3-point ultimatum consisting of terms that the Empire viewed as fair. The following are those terms. The current administration of Leprit is brought under the Hiklaxian Empire as a vassal state, free to make its own international trade deals and join in on international diplomacy that doesn't interfere with the Hiklaxian Empire's foreign policy. The current council is dissolved, with the leaders of each city of Leprit instead forming a new council within the region, with the capital city being from where the leader of this new council is to be elected. The new leadership of Leprit is to swear complete and total allegiance to the Hiklaxian Empire, iridescent of what species and political theory each individual are a part of. These terms, and likely more that have been lost to history, were the initial terms that the Emperor of Hiklax had laid out to the rogue state of Leprit. We are able to validate these terms as what were said by the historical reactions in the League of Nations at the time, with numerous nations requesting to know the full amount of terms present for the Lepritans to surrender without bloodshed. The continuation of hostilities had even been given its very own name to follow with the naming conventions of wars within the region, the Second Hiklaxian Lepritan War of Control. However, the hopes for such an outcome were dashed when the Lepritans had given their response to the Hiklaxian Empire. In a strong rebuke of the Empire as an idea for the Hiklaxian peoples, the Lepritans gave only one response: no. Calling out to volunteers and veterans of the previous round of hostilities, the Lepritans stood less of a chance to the Hiklaxians on paper. However, they made up for this with their strong morale. Knowing that the Lepritans were fighting for more than just self-determination, the Lepritan armed forces were fighting for the very right to be individuals, to be something more than just slaves to an empire that didn't consider them as people. The international community, however, continued to hold its breath on the matter, waiting for a major battle to occur. However, the Hiklaxian navy within the region was less equipped than the army was, bringing less to the theatre of combat than what the Lepritans had. However, what ships they did send to the theatre of combat in the initial stages was still more than what the Lepritans could handle, staging numerous attacks on the ports of Leprit in hopes to starve out the citizenry and force a quick acceptance of the peace terms. This conflict being declared on Monday the 7th of January 1805 was to be the bloodiest part of the Hiklaxian history to this point, even beating out the previously unmatched Democratic Revolution's reign at the top spot on that list, with major accounts of speculation all round to what caused this to occur. The Lepritans' response came 11 days later, on Friday, the 18th of January. We do, however, know one thing, that the Emperor was incredulously unlikely to accept anything less than the terms that he had laid out to the Lepritans, terms which he never asked the chambers of representatives for approval for, marking the first display of how the Hiklaxian Empire was truly an absolutionist monarchy. This war, however, would not deter the Hiklaxians from continuing to pursue their desires with their southern neighbour of Valter, with a delegation being sent to the nation that arrived in late January to sign a trade agreement. That's not the only delegation of Hiklaxians sent anywhere, however, as there were also a large mass of Hiklaxians sent to the League of Nations in the place of both the Emperor and his closest friend, the Grand Admiral of Hiklaxia. Delegates such as the ever-naive diplomat of Jakif and the ever-shrewd diplomat of Taimeh both of which were already distinguished diplomats of the Hiklaxian Empire before having been sent to the League of Nations as the permanent replacements to the Emperor himself. They performed their jobs to the utter enjoyment of the Emperor, swearing loyalty to no one else other than him. Both of these individuals, however, never really became of any renown to history from their work within the League of Nations. Despite being twins, they never really had a close relationship to the other, instead placing a higher purpose onto their emperor instead of the other. During the war in Leprit, the Athong branch received a letter from the Forgotten, one that they had again hid from the public. This letter, however, was far longer than the previous, and included the manifesto of the organization within. This letter would require its own special inquiry, which has been arranged for the sake of establishing a thorough report on the history of the world of Aurora. We do have time to discuss small extracts of the letter during this report, which we shall do. Their letter to the Athong branch was looked into by the Emperor himself and examined closely by his father, the very man who he fought in an honorable duel for the Empire. Both of them came to the same cold and calculated conclusion. Terror was needed to bring the peasants back in line. Terror that came with the public executions of renowned black market leaders who had been allowed to continue their lives due to the providing the peasants with amenities that the Empire was unwilling to. Provisions such as books, silks, trinkets, meats, crystals, and hats. Some of these black market leaders were rounded up and brought back to the Imperial Gardens in Hornley, where they were executed on the same platform as the leaders of the Democratic Revolution, with the same blade, and most importantly, by the Emperor himself. This time to a crowd of onlookers who knew those being executed as saviors, helpers, and producers of very valuable goods. This time the crowd was silent instead of cheerful. This time the crowd stood there as the Emperor followed part of what the Forgotten had asked for in exchange for not killing the Empress. The part of the Forgotten's letter which the Emperor had followed was the only section he deemed needed to be followed. While the Forgotten had asked for other things in their terms to be done, they had no response for what the Emperor chose to do. Their terms, which we are able to translate from Hiklaxian, were for the Hiklaxian Empire to empower the Prime Minister, reinstate the Emperor as a ceremonial role, reinstate order by destroying the black markets, and ending the state of slavery. All four of these are the only terms that the Forgotten had given to the Empire to our knowledge during this period. The Emperor, however, would refuse to do more of the demands of the Forgotten, with the Forgotten viewing the very acceptance of one of their demands as fundamental change likely to occur within the Hiklaxian Empire, leading to more and more Hiklaxians joining their ranks. However, their numbers remained small for the vast majority of the reign of Emperor Elixir the Great. The Forgotten's attempts at reordering Hiklaxian society, for the moment at least, fell dead at a standstill. However, one separate change in Hiklaxian societal norms was the stance against homosexuals, or if we're going to use a Hiklaxian adjective, the queers of Hiklax. Their treatment during the time was akin to our own history, albeit less deadly and more torturous in Hiklax's case. This was soon to change, however, as one of the nobility of Hiklax, specifically the Count of Ethilsh, Taime Heril, being a homosexual. The Emperor, due to his shrewd and diligent nature, decided to keep the man around nonetheless, being of the mind that the Count only saw his twin having potential as a judge for the Hiklaxian civil courts and not their father's heir, instead of a potential threat to Hiklaxian society, which in its own right brought some interesting subjects to the League of Nations, and presented homosexuals as a whole as accepted part of the Hiklaxian diaspora by the Emperor's Count. These changes to the Hiklaxian societal structure, however, was a chance for the Hiklaxian Conservative Party to start making the typical homophobic comments expected for radical conservative individuals. That is to say, they were speaking to the large-scale enslavement and forced labor of those who identified on the queer spectrum, as they called it, with their obvious first proponent being of the Count of Ethilch, with his soon recognized marriage to his lover in late January 1805, parading around this marriage as sacrilegious and illegal in the eyes of the peasantry. The Conservative Party was making headway in the ranks of the nobility for their desire for control to be regained. However, the peasants, even outside of the aforementioned county, paraded around the Count and his husband with pure pride in the smallest victory for individual rights in decades. These, however, weren't enough to change the course of public opinion in Hiklax, with a majority of the public in full support to the increase in hostilities to the Lepritans, and as such, the human population of the Hiklaxian Empire started to sign up in droves, with their slaves being included into the non-combat oriented branches of the armed forces of Hiklax, with salamanders serving in the weapons factories and as moving blowtorches, Harangong serving as pack animals and carrying the heavy equipment and ammunition, the Corvanthians acting as advanced scouts with their higher autonomy, and the Tors as the builders of pontoon bridges and other siege equipment, and lastly, the Tabaxi working as the messengers and running messages to the forward divisions by the commanders and generals at the rear of their respective formations. All 5 of the slave species of Hiklaxia working together in support of a regime that sought to make them all fight each other instead of themselves. To the human fighting force of the Imperial Army, they worked fantastic, allowing more humans to fight with their crucial weapons, while the slaves did the work of logistics and recon, granting some of their previous owners higher payments due to their slaves' work within the army. At sea, however, they each had far different jobs. The Tors, while at sea, were always seen below deck, carrying the cannonballs and the incendiary shells between cannons. The Corvanthians stood in the crow's nests, earning it the double-sided racist renown that Hiklaxia so enjoyed. The salamanders were barred from even stepping foot onto any naval vessel due to their bodies' immense heat and their ability to not properly control the flames they output while enslaved. This is all that we've uncovered in this report, however, and as such, we continue the archaeological dig, sifting through the ash and forgotten debris of the Hiklaxian ice sheet. The story of the Hiklaxian Empire will continue in due time. However, that's all for me today. If you wish to see some more moments of the story before they air, then please come check out our Discord, the link's in the description. If you wish to see more in the future, please do show your support, anything helps. As ever, I hope you've all enjoyed, and I'll see you all next time. Peace.